Keith, you're leading off, right?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to give you a little extra height.
Yeah,
You are now. You've grown.
Both of you.
You've grown in my estimation.
I appreciate that. Good morning. Thank you all for being here on a great day for the City Fleet Program for City Operations. My name is Keith Kerman. I'm the Chief Fleet Officer for the City of New York and a Deputy Commissioner at the Department of Citywide Administrative Services. I have worked in operations and fleet management for the city for 25 years at New York City Parks and DCAS. And even though I spend my days buying fleet cars and helping to manage fleet cars and setting policies for fleet cars, I have never commuted with a city fleet car to work, and I actually do not have a fleet vehicle assigned to me, even though that's in theory my job. When I started at DCAS, deputy commissioners were assigned fleet vehicles, but I gave mine up. I said add it to the city fleet share program, and maybe that's kind of a signal to some of my fleet partners here. I take the subway like most New Yorkers. I've ridden the 4 and the 7 so far today from the Upper East Side and right over and nearby here. Sometimes I take my bike, especially when I was at Parks. It's not just technology changes that we need to make, and we are working on those, but it's changes in our culture. We all have our roles in this, especially our great city fleet team who's behind here today. Fleet vehicles are important. They rush police officers to the scenes of crimes. They help us pave, clean, plow our streets. They support the work of buildings inspectors and really all the important public services provided every day by the City of New York. But it's important we do more with less. If we can provide services without using a vehicle, we need to do it. When we do use vehicles, we should use them as efficiently as possible. When we fuel them, we should use the cleanest and greenest technologies available. The City of New York has the safest and cleanest municipal fleet in the country, and under Mayor de Blasio, we have expanded and focused on green vehicles like never before. But the new measures announced today will help us build on these successes and do much more. I want to thank Mayor Bill de Blasio for his leadership and thank DCAS Commissioner Lisette Camillo for her support and commitment to the City Fleet Program. With that, I'd like to welcome Mayor Bill de Blasio.
Done, man. Thank you, Keith. And Keith, I really appreciate you are someone who is enthusiastic about your job, I can tell. And thank you. Thank you for the great work you do. And thank you for being one of the people that's helping us become a greener city in so many ways. Thank you. And let's all give Keith a round of applause. And to everyone here, thank you. Thanks for the great work you do. All New Yorkers depend on it. We really appreciate it. So everyone, happy opening day. I know the Mets are not here today, but we're still happy to be anywhere near a baseball park today. And we wanted to be here specifically because we needed a really big parking lot to show you the impact of what today's announcement would mean. All the cars that will disappear from the city fleet because of the actions that we're going to take today. This is one of the things we have to do to get to a greener planet. It begins with government doing all it can do. And I'll make a parallel. When we started out on our plans to reduce emissions 80% by 2050, we said we're going to retrofit all the public buildings that need it. And we said to the private sector, it's your turn next, and that legislation is coming very soon. Well, here's another example. We're going to say to everyone, use fewer cars, use fewer vehicles when you can. We're going to start with the public fleet. So today's announcement is about using fewer vehicles, more efficient vehicles, and greener vehicles. This is part of the way forward. This lot here, you could fill up this lot plus 200 more vehicles, and that would be the number of city cars we're going to be taking off the road in the next 2 years. We know we can do more with less. And today's announcement is all about making sure we're really making sense of how many vehicles we need and not having a single vehicle more. Now, this is the kind of thing, if you talk to New Yorkers, they get it. I always tell people all over the country, there are not really many climate deniers left in New York City since Sandy hit us. Sandy made really, really clear to us what global warming was doing to us. Left so many parts of the city underwater, left Breezy Point in flames, 44 New Yorkers killed, worst natural disaster in our history. But we know we're not alone. We've seen this year catastrophic flooding from Nebraska to Mozambique. This is clearly a global phenomenon. We all have to act on it in every way we can. So New York City's taking the lead. I mentioned we are adhering to the Paris Agreement, 80% emissions by 2050, and we are working right now to speed that program up. We announced recently new coastal defense systems to protect against rising oceans and to protect against storms and torrential rainfall. We're divesting $5 billion from fossil fuel investments through our pension funds. We're investing $4 billion in renewable energy. All of these efforts are needed and a lot more. Today's announcement is one of many you'll be hearing in the coming weeks as we supercharge our efforts. We have to shift into high gear to fight global warming, and this city has to be one of the leaders on this earth. So we're going to start with this action today, and right now I'm going to sign the executive order that will start the efforts to change our fleet once and for all, make it smaller and greener, more efficient. I have a witness. Thank you, Lizette. There you go, everybody. This announces that we will take 1,000 city vehicles off the road in the next 2 years. 1,000 fewer city vehicles to help our city get greener and to take those vehicles off the streets to help with congestion as well. Now, this executive order takes effect immediately, and the efforts will begin right away. And in addition to taking 1,000 vehicles off the road, we will replace over 250 gas-burning SUVs with electric or hybrid vehicles. And I think we have some good examples right around us here of the kind of vehicles you'll be seeing more of as we change our fleet and modernize it. To give you a little example of what this will mean, this reduction in 1,000 vehicles will mean 10 million fewer miles driven per year. It will mean 500,000 fewer gallons of gas burned per year. It will be the equivalent every year of keeping 7 million pounds of coal in the ground. And this is one step of many we will be taking. Now, as you heard before, we're going to make sure that everything we do is good for Mother Earth, but we're not going to change how we approach the response times of the NYPD and the FDNY. We're not going to change how we go about snow plowing. Those efforts will remain steady, but there's so many other things that we can do. So the bottom line is our carbon footprint will get smaller, but not our emergency fleet. We will keep that strong for the needs of the people of this growing city. Bottom line is we have shown in this city we can do great things. We're the safest big city in America. We've shown that we can build more affordable housing than ever before. We're going to show that we can get greener than ever before, and we can make this city a model for this nation and this world to emulate. Today is a step in that direction. Now, let me say a few words in Spanish before I turn to the commissioner. Nuestra ciudad trabaja cada día para enfrentar el cambio climático. Vamos a sacar 1,000 autos del gobierno municipal de nuestras calles y a reemplazar más de 250 autos municipales por otros eléctricos o híbridos. Estamos actuando para garantizar los servicios municipales mientras seguimos en nuestra lucha para salvar el planeta. With that, and I want to thank Commissioner Lizette Camillo of DCAS. She has been an innovator all of her time in city government. This is a labor of love for her, making sure that everything we do supports a healthier planet. And DCAS is a huge operation with huge impact on this city. And I want to thank her for her leadership, her spirit of innovation, and her real belief that we can do things that have never been done before. Commissioner Lizette Camillo. Do you want to step? I don't think you need to step.
I'm good. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Mayor de Blasio, for letting me speak today. And I just wanted to, before I jump in, thank our own Deputy Commissioner Keith Kerman for all of his work in helping position New York City as a leader in fleet management. For those of you who don't know, DCAS, at DCAS we provide value-added and effective shared services to support the governmental operations of New York City. And this includes managing New York City's fleet. The fleet includes everything from police cars and fire trucks used by our first responders to snowplows to clean up our streets after snowstorms and sanitation trucks that keep our city clean. The city will always need vehicles to do its job, and we've made investments in these areas to improve the services for New Yorkers. But there's more that we can do, and now we'll have new technology that will help us do it. The mayor's new executive order charts a course to cut the size of the vehicle fleet, reduce the number of take-home vehicles, and decrease the use of SUVs. We will accomplish this goal by working smarter. All fleet vehicles will now be equipped with new technology that will allow us to track vehicle usage. Known as vehicle telematics, this technology will allow us to see where vehicles are going and when they are being used. This will help us identify patterns and inform how we can more efficiently use vehicles, when city work can be done using mass transit, and when some fleet vehicles can be eliminated. We started installing this technology last year, and we will now expand it to the entire fleet. This technology is helping us see when vehicles are sitting unused for days or weeks at a time. It's helping us understand driving patterns. It's even helping us understand how we can better route vehicle traffic to save time and reduce congestion. The executive order will also reduce the number of employees who will take home city vehicles. While there are limited circumstances where a vehicle is needed in this way, as with emergency personnel who need to race to an incident during off-duty hours, vehicle telematics will make sure that every take-home vehicle is justified. If we see it's being misused, or if its driving patterns show it's not needed for work, and instead being used solely to commute, we're going to pull it off the road and assign it to meet other needs. This executive order also calls for the phasing out of more gas-guzzling SUVs. Not only are there environmental benefits to transitioning SUVs to smaller electric-powered vehicles, but electric vehicles also reduce fueling and maintenance costs, thereby saving more money. Our use of electric vehicles is already paying off in a dramatic fashion. Because of the expanded use of electric vehicles, the light-duty fleet we purchased last year have an average 100 miles per gallon fuel economy equivalent. You heard that right, 100 miles per gallon. At a time when Washington is turning its back on climate change, we are showing what cities can do to lead the way. The executive order offers an important step in the right direction. It builds upon the many historic achievements in fleet management under the mayor's leadership. We have transitioned over 1,700 on-road vehicles to electric vehicles, a transition that is larger than any other city in the country. We have the largest network of electric vehicle chargers, including 65 charging stations that are 100% solar powered. Fleet vehicles are literally running on sunlight. We are also using renewable diesel, which is a 99% petroleum-free alternative to traditional diesel. It's made of organic materials like plant waste instead of dirty fossil fuels. Working together, we can reduce the number of cars on our street, better protect the environment, and make sure city government is operating efficiently and effectively for New York City residents. I thank the mayor for his leadership in this area, and we look forward to rolling up our sleeves and delivering on these new commitments.
Thank you very much, Lizette. I want to take any questions now on what we're going to do to reduce the fleet, and obviously anything if you want to ask about any climate change related matters, etc. Andrew.
Vehicles more than when you took office. So why is the goal not higher than 1,000? And how do you explain that the total number of vehicles has gone up since you became mayor?
Yeah, the city has grown is the first explanation. I want people to really understand that. This city is growing very quickly. The projection still is we're going to pick up another 500,000 people in the next 20 years or so. We've had a lot more need that we had to address. For example, emergency response time has required more vehicles, more ambulances, for example. We have to balance the equation, but what we're finding at the same time is there's a lot of vehicles we can do away with. And obviously the goal is to keep reducing the number of vehicles. I absolutely agree with that goal. And here's an important point, and I really want to thank the commissioner. That telematics she talked about, we're going to learn now in a way we never could before, what's actually happening with the vehicles every hour, every day, and where can we keep cutting back and reducing. We want to do that. But the balance here always is we've got to provide the services New Yorkers need, particularly the emergency services, while finding a way to get greener all the time. And this is a very substantial step. Marcia.
Mr. Mayor, are you going to be changing your own vehicles, maybe getting an electric car? Or
what I have now is a different car than what I started with. This is a hybrid electric. It's a Chrysler Pacifica. So between its electric function and the traditional function, it goes 500 plus miles on a single fill-up. So this is a very, very efficient vehicle. Yeah.
Has that changed the way you feel it?
Again, please?
Do you feel that using that kind of a vehicle has changed the ride? Has it changed?
It's a great vehicle. I really like it. I think this is a point I've heard from a lot of people with electric cars or hybrid electric cars. They perform very, very well. I think some years ago we all had a stereotype. Maybe they were slower or less responsive. This one really performs well under New York City conditions.
Your message to New Yorkers who might be hesitant to change to either hybrid or...
Yeah, no, Marcia, my message to all New Yorkers, I have a hybrid electric vehicle. It works great. I think that's a great option. I think electric vehicles are a great option. More and more models, more and more options. We're going to be putting up electric charging stations all over the city that are going to be available to the public, make it easier to have an electric car here. I think that's the way of the future.
Yeah, this might be a better question for Keith, but given the fact that the growth in vehicles over the last few years has been in emergency preparedness and whatnot, where is this decrease coming from?
Either one of you, do you want to start?
So this is what we're going to use the telematics to let us know where we can cut the fleet without affecting the services that we were looking at. We're working towards an 80% utilization for all city fleet. Right now, preliminary data indicates we're at a 67% utilization. So once we're working towards an 80%, and the ones that we see that are not being used efficiently will reduce in order to not affect services.
So you haven't determined yet where those 1,000 vehicles are coming from?
No, that's why we need the technologies assisting us.
What's the timeline for that?
You want to add on that previous, and then we'll come up there.
I do also want to mention something. When you look in the Mayor's Management Report, and we report extensively on the city fleet there, you see a fleet increase. More than half of what you're seeing are not cars and SUVs on the road. It's equipment like that solar light tower right there. So after Hurricane Sandy and under Mayor de Blasio, we invested in an enormous amount of equipment for resiliencies to make sure the city can respond to storms. Light towers, generators, water pumps, forklifts. So a lot of what is reported as fleet is really emergency equipment to make sure when the next big storm comes that we're going to be ready as we can possibly be. And then, of course, almost all the rest is emergency services. But the city has 5,500 vans and pickups, hundreds and hundreds of dump trucks, the sedan fleet. We have lots of areas that won't impact plowing and won't impact fire and police emergency response where we can get these reductions.
What's your last question?
That was just the timeline for determining what vehicles are going to get reduced.
So we're starting to collect some of that information right now with the installations that we have, so it'll start immediately. And as we complete the installations, which we expect to do shortly, that'll just be stepped up.
Rich.
Do these hybrid vehicles cost more? Is the city paying a premium for them?
They don't. We award all of our contracts through low bidding procurements, so we get the best deal that we get through public procurement.
Yeah, and Rich, to that, one of the things we're finding with the vehicles, and we're also finding in general with everything related to renewables, the more you buy, the more the cost goes down. So we're one of the biggest markets in the country. Obviously, we're the biggest city. So when we act and we buy more electric vehicles, when we buy more hybrid electric vehicles, it actually helps the cost of those vehicles to go down for everyone. Willie.
The gentleman,
Keith.
Could he tell us how many vehicles are currently owned and operated by the city, and how many vehicles there were in January of 2014 when the mayor started?
I think this is already public information, but we're happy to share it.
So there are 25,500 on-road vehicles, and that's up about 2,500 from where we were in 2014.
2014.
I can get you the exact number, but it's about 2,500 up. What that increase is, 88% of that increase, the majority of that increase, is the police department, about 1,400 response units for the police department, 300 fire trucks and ambulances, and then the publicly reported 140 additional plow trucks that were invested in for the city after the Jonas storm. And then some inspection vehicles, and we make lots of changes, but the core of that increase was emergency response and plowing.
You say about 2,500. You don't have an actual number.
I'll get you the
us?
number later, my friend. He just said it.
So that's the mayor that.
Let me continue on that, and then you can continue. The very important point to remember, everyone, we want to do the math as we go along here. In the last few years, we added 2,000 more police officers on patrol. We also initiated the Critical Response Command Anti-Terror Unit. Those realities, which have made the city a lot safer and helped protect us against terrorism, also required more vehicles. So Lizette and Keith will lay out the specifics, but I want people to understand those are strategic choices. We think they've been the right choices. But at the same time, very important point that Keith made, there's a lot of other areas where we see reductions right away, and we think there'll be more reductions after that. Go ahead, Will.
No, I was going to say, so you've increased the vehicles by 2,500, and now you're decreasing them by 1,000.
Right.
So it's still a net increase.
Yeah, and again, this is the first step to what I think will be greater decreases over time. Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry, my apologies. Let me someone go who hasn't gone.
The DCAS commissioner talked about the importance of doing government business on mass transit and improving as much as possible. Will you commit to lead by example and take the subway twice?
I've said it every single time. I'm not going to repeat the answer I've given 1,000 times. Go ahead, Jill.
Mayor, talking about people taking their vehicles home, or it seems that in the past few years there have been some problems that COIB has highlighted at certain agencies. Corrections comes to mind, where went all the way up to the commissioner, where people using their vehicles, their city vehicles, for personal business, sometimes long trips. At the same time, while it's not exactly the same issue, we see the issue of placard abuse. I know that's with someone's personal car. But do you think that there's some message about the use of vehicles that's not getting through?
I think the message is getting through. First of all, that the issues you first raised have been addressed very aggressively, and I want to thank Commissioner Camillo. She's been one of the leaders on this. And we're not seeing that because there's been a really clear message sent to all agencies about what we expect. Second, this beautiful new word, telematics, we're now going to be able to track in a way that was never possible before. And that's going to allow us to keep reducing the fleet as we get more and more information about what we really need and what we don't need. And then on the placard point, it's the announcement we made. Again, technology is going to be a game changer here, where we're going to be able to sweep, an agent will be able to sweep a whole street and immediately find out who's doing something illegal, and then we can crack down on it. We can take away placards from people who are abusing them. So a lot is about to change, and I think people are getting the message that, if you think it's the old days, it's not going to be. It's going to be a very different reality. Go ahead, Gloria.
Is there, Mr. Mayor, is there a price tag for these new cars, these zero-emissions vehicles that you are talking about? And is there a timeline for phasing out the ones that no longer meet these same standards?
So under the executive order, the 1,000 reduction will be done by June 30th of 2021. The work is starting immediately, though, so that's the extended time frame.
A price tag?
Oh, the savings. Yeah, we've estimated about $21 million in savings over 2 years.
What did this cost?
We'll get back to you on how much they cost per car.
We can get back to you, and I'll give you both this assignment with our communications folks, get back on what the costs are for these new kinds of vehicles, but also how it nets out. because we're obviously going to save by having a lot fewer vehicles. And again, broadly, as the commissioner said, a lot of these vehicles now are cost competitive with the more traditional models. Who hasn't gone? Yes, right there.
You've been supportive of the congestion pricing and talking about this. Is this an example of you putting your money where your mouth is, or rolling into it? You tell me. I don't want to put my words in your head.
No, these are good words. Yeah, I mean, we're all going to make a series of changes as we address global warming. And this is a great example. The city can do a lot more. And we're going to show people it can work. I mean, to Marcia's point before, I think a lot of people actually would like to turn to electric vehicles if they could see that they really work for their lives. Announcement we made a year or two ago to have electric charging stations everywhere is going to be one of the things that makes that possible for everyday New Yorkers. Also, people seeing that the city fleet's going more electric and hybrid is going to be an encouragement to people. So that's very important. The other connection here to congestion pricing that's not actually getting enough attention, if you fix the subway system and it becomes truly reliable, people will not use their cars as much. People will have the option to not buy a car. People have the option to leave their car at home a lot more often. I talked to so many New Yorkers who are using their car because they simply can't trust the subway system. We're talking about a plan in Albany now that will put tens of billions of dollars into the subway, which they've needed for a long, long time. They're finally going to get. We can upgrade our subway and make it something that really changes people's behavior for the better because they have an option they can rely on. Thank you. Okay, who hasn't gone? Yes.
What's going to happen with those 1,000+ cars that are taken off the street?
What's going to happen to the actual vehicles?
So once we determine that a car is no longer needed or being used, if we can't repurpose, we actually have an auction program to generate revenue administered by DCAS for the city revenue, yeah.
Yes, we keep the money for sure. Marcia.
So, Mr. Mayor, if you exempt the emergency vehicles, what kinds of vehicles will you be taking off the street, and who will lose their cars, the right to drive up city blocks?
What kind of vehicles are we taking off the street, and what was the last part?
And who will lose their right to take home the city?
Okay, so what kind of vehicles are we taking off the street, and what kind of officials in the city might not be taking home vehicles anymore?
So it's a broad array. Any vehicle that we determine that is not being utilized, agencies will have to relinquish. So it can be anywhere from anything from a sedan to an SUV. It really does depend on the data associated with what we find and the fleet assigned to the agency. It really does determine the decision.
Any kind of a goal, like for example, the health department should decrease by a certain percentage, DCAS by a certain percentage, different agencies.
We don't have that information now, but because of the information that we're going to glean or get from the telematics, and we get the 80% target of utilization, that will then inform how many vehicles need to be relinquished.
80% utilization.
So we want to make sure that at least 80% of all of the agency's vehicles are being utilized regularly.
Well done. Go ahead, Willie.
I guess I'm trying to understand this thing of utilization. It sounds like going from 67% to 80% means that the vehicles that remain will be used more than before. So do you have can you tell me how many total miles the city vehicle fleet drives today and how much it will be reduced by after these changes?
Just want to caution on the beginning of that question, correct me if I'm misunderstanding. If a vehicle is not being used consistently enough, it's out, we pull it out of this, out of commission, out of the agency. That doesn't necessarily mean that the other vehicles are going to be used more. I think some of what we're saying here is that there was a history of having vehicles and some of them probably weren't needed at all. And it doesn't mean necessarily other vehicles will be used more. Is that a fair statement?
So, first off, this is not just about taking cars that don't get used off the road. Through telematics, we will have a better ability to study, analyze how we deploy city fleet in every possible way. The routes that we take, are we going the most direct routes? Are there more efficient ways to get from one place to another, to do a park cleaning crew, to do a sanitation route? Are we idling in locations where we should be thinking about driving in another way? So this is about thinking about how we do business entirely, not just find a few cars that we don't use. In addition, the reduction in commuting will reduce miles. So this is a comprehensive effort to kind of look at how we operate in all the different services that we provide to get people out of cars wherever we can, whether that's the subway, whether that's telecommuting, whether that's any other kind of initiative, but also to really think about our routing. We've never had the capacity to really do that kind of analysis in this way before. And so you're going to see a lot of business improvements that go beyond just here's a few cars you can auction.
Keith,
Total
hold on one
miles
second.
are
On the
driven
previous
today.
question he asked about total miles driven per year by city. Do we know that offhand?
Yes, so it's 180 million miles, including the police department. And we're going to reduce at least 10 million miles through this initiative alone. I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Having fewer cars or a result of the telemetrics that allow...
It's about the entire initiative of looking at how we deploy, how we utilize vehicles, where we can get out of vehicles, where we can reduce commuting, where we can improve routing. So this is a very, very powerful tool that we are very happy that we've been able to invest in. And you know, the first thing we're going to do is knock down the vehicle fleet, but there are going to be lots of other very positive aspects of this as we go forward.
Will you count the projected or actual savings from this plan towards the budget peg?
I'm not familiar, honestly, with what the discussion has been with OMB. Perfectly fair question, but I don't know if OMB has been looking at this as part of that or not, so I will get an answer for you from OMB.
You, from the podium this morning, repeatedly talked about how important it is that New Yorkers look at various aspects of their lives and find ways to reduce their carbon footprint. When the UN report came out, I stopped taking Lyft, I take the bus, I take Citi Bike to get around Brooklyn on the weekends now. I'm wondering, can you provide New Yorkers with some tangible examples of what you've done to reduce your own personal carbon footprint?
Yeah, to me, look, I try to be mindful in everything I do, and that includes recycling. I'm always focused on recycling in my personal life. I'm mindful if I don't need to go somewhere, I don't go there. It's a question in each and every situation of what you can do. But I think the difference, and I'm going to say it one more time with great respect, but I would ask people to recognize, I've said this many, many times, I have a different life because of the nature of public life today. If I didn't need 24-hour security, I assure you I'd be happy to walk the streets on my own. But those vehicles are going with me wherever I go. Those officers are going with me wherever I go. There's no such thing as me being able to separate from that. So if I go in a subway, those vehicles follow the subway. If, God forbid, there was an emergency, I would have to get out at the next stop, surface, and meet the police vehicles and go wherever the emergency was. It's just not like everyday people's lives. I want to be honest. I think most New Yorkers understand that. But I think all of us need to make decisions as best we can to address the situation we're in. For example, I've said publicly, I don't intend to own a car starting on January 1st, 2022. Because I think there's, one, I don't think I'll need it as someone who will go back to using the subway a lot. And two, there's zip cars and other things now to give people options like you were describing. But everyone has to make the decisions that work for them in their life. Some people need a car for a variety of reasons, so it's all about individual reality. Yes?
Mayor, you talked about the billions of dollars to revitalize the subway for the congestion pricing. As we get closer to that vote, a lot of lawmakers are asking for carve-outs, essentially their bridge they don't have to pay. There's a proposal the RFK wouldn't have to. The Rockland lawmakers don't want the GW Bridge. Andy Byford said yesterday, if you have too many carve-outs, you whittle down the total, and then you can't modernize the subway. Right. How concerned should we be that this finished product doesn't do anything?
No, I don't believe that's going to be the case. I think there's a legitimate desire of elected officials to fight for their constituents, and there's an overriding need to come up with a plan that will actually fix the subways. Fixing the subways is not only important to the 5 boroughs. The entire metropolitan area hinges on whether the subway works or not. So in the end, I've talked to a lot of legislators, including from the suburbs. They all get that, but I don't blame them. They're trying to fight for their constituents. In the end, I believe there will be a balanced plan that recognizes which carve-outs are truly necessary, but the dollar figure is what matters here. And I remind people, I know all of us as New Yorkers sometimes have trouble being optimistic, but here's something that's just plain positive. Since this process began a few weeks ago and the governor and I presented our plan, the plan actually got better. because the discussion turned to real estate taxes and to ways that we could actually add more revenue than we anticipated in a way that is sustainable, in a way that is very progressive, because obviously most of those real estate taxes will come from upper income people. So I think we're going to see a plan with the kind of revenue we need to fix the MTA once and for all.
Will there be they've talked about helping the poor or the indigent by exempting people with some kind of a tax credit who earn $60,000 or less. Do you think that's a good level?
I'm not going to comment. I want to respect the legislators trying to make sense of the details. I've said there are some valid hardships, but I also, to the previous question, know we have to be measured. You can't give an exemption for everything or a hardship case for everything. It has to be relatively rare, but I'm not going to get into details. They have to work that out.
On congestion pricing, it's expected to generate about $15 billion, which the MTA hopes will pay for future construction projects. But the plan also includes no new cost controls on the MTA. This is the agency that blew $12 billion putting a hole under Grand Central. What confidence should New Yorkers have they're not going to be back in Albany in 5 or 10 years asking for another new shot of cash?
No, it's a very important question. I've talked to the governor about this at length. And we are both adamant that the culture of the MTA has to change, the way decisions are made have to change, the transparency of the MTA has to change. I think what's happened here is we've all gone through a crisis together, and there is a growing consensus on what we have to do. And I was very struck on Tuesday in Albany, talking to not only the two legislative leaders, but lots of members. I probably talked to 30 or 35 members of the Senate and Assembly. Everyone understands what time it is. We have now ended up in the middle of a crisis. We must fix the subways. So it has to involve changing the way the MTA does business. And I think the MTA's errors are now more out in the open than ever before. And there's a recognition that the state runs the MTA, which is something that wasn't so true a couple of years ago. So those issues must be dealt with aggressively, and I think they will be. Let's go ahead.
Are we off topic now?
We're going to go off topic. Go ahead.
I'm hoping you can respond to reports from last week that the Queens Boulevard bike lane is caught up in the discussions about the jail in Kew Gardens. I know you met with Councilmember Kozlowitz yesterday. I'm wondering if that came up. And what
did not come up in the conversation.
Going to get implemented?
We have to work out the timing. There's more to be done on that. Obviously, we've been very committed to addressing the issues of Queens Boulevard. It's been one of the #1 priorities under Vision Zero. More to come, but there's a lot of details to work through.
Promise that the bike lane is going to happen?
I can promise that on Queens Boulevard, we're going to ultimately follow through on the vision we put forward. I can't tell you the exact timing and details because we're still working on them. Wait a second, let it go by. What are you like? You look like a talk show host here. What's going on here? Like, he's trying to give the mic. You want? Go ahead, Eric. Take over. Come on down.
The first question has to do with the plan by the City Council to outlaw the sale of fur apparel in New York City. I wonder if you support it, but also if you're concerned by the loss of jobs. There's 130 businesses, 1,100 jobs. It's a $400 million business in New York City.
Sure.
What do you feel about it? What are your concerns?
So I will start by saying I am humanly sympathetic to folks in that industry because it is a lot of jobs, and once upon a time my family was in the garment industry. That's how my grandmother came from southern Italy, and with her sister and her mother started a clothing business, and it was actually in the garment center for a period of time. So I don't belittle the concern. I think if something happens here, there has to be some sense of how to phase it in a way that really does try and protect some jobs. But I also want to say the impulse of that legislation, I do agree with. I haven't seen the specific legislation. It's something we have to talk to the council about. But the underlying idea, I agree with.
Do you think would be a fair way to phase it in or to change it so that you can save some jobs?
Yeah, I don't have the exact formula. As I said, I haven't seen the legislation. I'm telling you what my values are in this. I think there is a way to achieve the ultimate goal, which I agree with, in a way that also respects the existing businesses and jobs. We have to figure out what that looks like.
About it?
I just told you, I think that was a pretty clear answer. Go ahead.
The First Lady, Chirlane McCray, went on the radio with you yesterday, and in response to criticism about the Thrive Initiative, said haters are going to hate. Is that an appropriate response when the comptroller came back with a report that says 29 of 41 programs funded by this initiative don't have any clear metrics for success?
First of all, with all due respect to the comptroller, we consistently disagree with his analyses. So I'm not going to make that the coin of the realm. He's often wrong about his facts. Two, just plain and simple. Two, what she said is true in the case of some people. Some of the criticism has been astounding to me, because you have to look at the problem and what she's trying to address. Now, I want to say the City Council, I thought, held a very good hearing. And I want to say that very clearly. I thought the City Council held a hearing that was really trying to get at the underlying meaning of the program, how it's working, where it needs improvement. It's a very good dialogue. And Charlene was there for hours with her colleagues and very happy to be there answering the question, and she's going to keep talking about all the things that are being done to make the program better. But I want people to pay attention to the bigger situation here, and this is where this whole discussion, I think, has gone backwards. If I said to you, I want to tell you about a problem that affects 1.6 million New Yorkers, I would get your attention immediately. That is the fact. 20% of all Americans suffer from a mental health challenge. When you think about the family members affected, it's millions more. This is a huge problem. I understand why some people have been fixated on the seriously mentally ill, but I remind you, typical estimates say that's about 6% of folks with mental health challenges. We care about that. But we also care about 1.6 million people suffering who right now, up until now, there wasn't a vision to address their needs. There is no national mental health strategy. There's no state mental health strategy. Before Charlene came along, there was no city mental health strategy. So it is the right thing to do to put this in motion and try and figure out what works. But here's the problem, guys. If everyone knew what worked already, we would have just reached on the shelf, taken out the handbook, and done that. Because there hasn't been a mental health strategy, the only way to find out is to talk to the experts and try ideas that look promising and figure out what works and doesn't work. I have no doubt in my mind that Thrive is reaching many, many tens of thousands of people all the time and helping them improve their lives. But I also want to tell you, it will strengthen every year because it's an initial investment on something that will take years to be addressed. And I'll come back to what we were just talking about. If 20 years ago, folks had focused on the MTA and said, we have a problem, if we don't invest now, the MTA is really going to be in horrible shape in 20 years, we would not be talking about the crisis we're talking about today when it comes to mass transit. A long time ago, there should have been investments in mental health. It's the root cause of a lot of homelessness, a lot of mass incarceration, a lot of families falling apart. There should have been investment a long time ago. So I say Charlene's 100% on the right track, but we're going to keep working all the time to make it better. Yes?
Given the scope and the cost of Thrive, do you think someone maybe other than the First Lady, maybe someone who is a doctor or has a mental health background professionally, should have maybe been in charge in such a large initiative?
No, I'll tell you why. So who was the person in all those previous administrations with a health background who created a vision to actually address the root causes of the mental health crisis? No one did it. No one did it nationally, no one did it at the state level, no one did it at the city level. This is why I understand the concerns, and they're very valid. People say, help us understand results, help us understand, did we get our money's worth? It's 100% valid conversation. The challenge with mental health is some people have honestly said to me, well, have people been cured? Which immediately suggests a misunderstanding. Mental health challenges just don't evaporate and go away. They have to be treated in many cases over a lifetime. But if people get treatment, their lives change and a whole bunch of social ills get addressed. So the fact is, no one had the audacity to say, this situation is totally broken, we have to do something very different. She went out for a year and talked to experts and talked to folks who were suffering, talked to community members, and Thrive came out of that. And we said, we're not going to keep doing the same broken status quo. We're going to do something very different. That's how it emerged. Yes?
Given Thrive's focus on providing mental health help to kids in schools and sort of the increased need for that, why not include funding for the Bridging the Gap social workers for homeless children in your preliminary budget?
We are looking constantly at the question of how to improve mental health services in schools, because I think this is one of the most powerful parts of Thrive. Right now, for the first time, every school, every one of our 1,800 public schools has access to mental health professionals. And all of our principals are being trained in how to be able to access that help. And teachers are being trained into how to look for potential signs of mental illness so kids can get help, families can get help, right down to the pre-K level. So there's a lot now. We do need to decide what the future of that looks like. And I think this is an area, it's all going to depend on resources, but one of the things we want to do more is more social emotional learning initiatives, more focus on mental health in the schools. We got to balance that with a bunch of other mental health needs, but that's one of the things we certainly want to do more on going forward.
Follow up on that, Councilman Mark Traeger, who's the chair of the Education Committee, said that he had heard from a lot of principals that when they would call the borough offices seeking someone who could provide direct services to children in schools where they maybe don't have a full-time guidance counselor or social worker, they had trouble getting access to that. And in the testimony, it came out that at 900 of these schools where there's a consultant, a mental health consultant as the mental health provider, they can't provide direct services. They can only connect to another person who provides them.
This is the very fair question, but I want to remind people, this gets back to the entire nature of the problem to begin with. Because this country doesn't have a mental health system, what happened, and we experienced in our own lives, and Shirlane's talked about this a lot, when we had mental health challenges in our family, we didn't know where to turn. We had to literally go out and research trying to understand, where do you even get help? How do you find a way to get access to it? Who's going to talk to you about what works and what doesn't? How do you pay for it? All of these things were mysterious. They're mysterious to the vast majority of people. So we had to invent from the beginning a point of access, and that's why 888 NYC Well is so important, because that's any type of mental health challenge, and obviously substance misuse as well. This is a beginning. But if you think about it, now you're saying to people, okay, start here. Here's a place where you can talk to someone trained, and then they can figure out where there's more help. Now, there is a lot of help available. There are a lot of places to plug people into treatment. Is it everything we want? No, because there's no serious federal funding for mental health, and there's no serious state funding for mental health in terms of the level of the problem. It's 20% of our population. There's no funding even slightly commensurate to the level of need. So we've got to understand this is, there's no parity between mental health and physical health. Everyone says this is the goal. We're, as a country, so far off that mark, it's crazy. So we have to understand one of the things we're doing better now is connecting people to the resources that do exist. We also have to greatly increase the amount of mental health services available everywhere. To that point, though, I can tell you one thing, having even the consultant available. If you're a principal, you're a teacher, and there's even a professional can come in and talk to you about how to navigate a problem, that is still a lot better than what existed before, where there was no one to turn to. The goal is to get more and more options that people can turn to, but at least there's a place to start now. We want to build upon that. Yes?
So, Mr. Mayor, two unrelated
Yeah.
issues, all right? Do you or the First Lady either have anything that has fur on it? Do you like fur?
I do not like fur. I do not believe I have anything that has fur on it. You have not seen me in my full-length mink coat because I don't own one. It wouldn't be a good look for me anyway. I can't remember her having anything with fur on it. I can't speak for her, but I don't remember ever seeing her in anything fur.
Don't want a mink coat?
What's that, Marcia?
Don't want a mink coat?
Marcia, I'm going to make a controversial announcement. I do not own a mink coat, and I do not want a mink coat.
Mine parka?
Sorry, Marcia. No mink for me.
The other one is advertising barges on the river. There's legislation to prohibit it. What's your thinking about it?
Well, we've initiated legal action to stop it. I think it's an affront to the people of this city. I think it is, it's polluting our visual environment. We don't need more pollution of our visual environment. There's enough out there as it is. But also it's dangerous. You know, when I'm going down the FDR, why are those barges with the advertising and neon signs right next to the FDR? Because so many people go on the FDR. What are they trying to do? Get people to look at them. What does that mean? That means drivers who are not watching the road. It's absolutely wrong, and I think our legal action will succeed in getting them out of here, but I certainly welcome the council's actions as well. Gloria.
So my 2 questions. Do you have an update for us on where the NYCHA chair search is, and will you meet next week's deadline?
We are going, so we've been in daily conversations with HUD in Washington and with Southern District of the Justice Department. Very productive conversations. You know, there's a phrase they use, I think the trains use them, I'm not sure if the planes use them, but they say on or close. So that's where we are right now. we're going to be either on the deadline or close to the deadline. Everyone is in agreement that we're closing in on a solution that we can announce very soon.
So will you meet the deadline?
As I said, on or close. But what matters here is the three parties are all in agreement on the process, and we're going to be able to make an announcement soon.
And I just want to also address the elephant.
There's an elephant? Where's the elephant? Gloria, the rest of us can't see the elephant.
I talked about how it's opening day.
Yes.
You wished us a happy opening day.
Happy opening day.
You said, I'm just glad to be anywhere near any baseball field today.
Very happy to be near Citi Field where the Mets play. They're a great team.
Do you want to say anything about why you're not at Yankee Stadium or near it?
I've been very clear about that fact repeatedly. It wouldn't be a good experience for anyone involved. Hold on a sec. The Chancellor and I have said that we want to look at how to create more good high school options. There's actually a lot more than people realize. We got to do a better job showing parents and students how many good high school options there are now. But we do want to keep creating more high school options, and we're open to expanding upon the seats we have now in the specialized schools. But that's a specific discussion that we're going to have certainly with Albany as well.
Expanding or creating new specialized high schools.
I'm going to keep it more generic. I'm going to say we're open to adding specialized high school seats. But again, that's a conversation we're going to have specifically with the legislators in Albany.
Back to opening day.
Yes.
We're here at Citi Field. Is this a sign you may renew your flirtation with Mets fandom?
I have said that I have tremendous appreciation for the New York Mets. It's the 50th anniversary of one of the greatest teams in baseball history. And I was a tender, young 8-year-old at the time. But anyone who loved baseball loved the 1969 New York Mets. And I mean, it was amazing to watch. So we're going to celebrate them this year. And I wish this year's team a lot of luck. You know, I root for the Boston Red Sox. I always have. I always will. But I feel very good about the New York Mets. And I always say there is no conflict between our peoples. Different leagues. Yes.
1986.
That's the only time. And very important statement. Very important statement. No, it wasn't, because the Mets won fair and square. It is no conflict. I didn't like what I saw, but they won fair and square.
So for the specialist high school, you said you want more conversations with Asian community.
Yes.
Do you have more future plans to talk to Asian?
Absolutely. Look, when we rolled out the vision on specialized high schools, it was by no means trying to create a negative or a divisive situation. That was not the intention. It was to address what we saw as a historic injustice. There's no question at the same time, I have to say, I wish I had done it better. And I want to have a dialogue with Asian community leaders because we want to make sure that kids from the community do well, obviously. We want every kid to do well. So I don't think it has to be one community versus another. The whole question is, how do we support everyone's needs? I will tell you honestly, the status quo in the specialized high schools to me is broken. I think the test, any single high-stakes test, doesn't make sense anymore in this day and age. But we've got to come up with a solution that really does respect the needs of the Asian community too. So my goal is to sit soon with Asian community leaders and have that conversation, and obviously to work with the legislators in Albany as well. Andrew.
Mayor, on the 2020 front,
yes, sir.
If I understand correctly, your plan was to be in the city this weekend or Albany because of the state budget.
Correct.
Do you have ongoing plans to go to other states in April, and where do things stand on the sooner rather than later front?
Sooner rather than later?
Later?
Sooner rather than later?
But do you have ongoing plans to visit other
There will be
states?
more travel, yes.
Mr. Mayor, also on that point, when your recent travels, you talked a lot about the Red Sox and your pride for the Red Sox. And
I was in New Hampshire, Gloria.
And how,
Red Sox country.
Sports impossibilities and presidential impossibilities could be possibilities, and you're so proud of that. So why aren't you? I mean, you could go to the Bronx today and talk about your Red Sox pride.
Everyone would like to hear that in the Bronx.
Mr. Mayor.
I'm stupid, but I'm not dumb, Gloria. Not the place for me today. Yes.
Former Parks Commissioner Henry Stern has passed away. I wonder if there's anything you'd like to say about that.
Say it again, I couldn't hear.
Former Parks Commissioner Henry Stern
Oh,
has passed
okay.
away.
I did not know that.
just happened?
He was a great New Yorker, a colorful New Yorker to say the least, an eccentric New Yorker, but a guy who got a lot done, who cared deeply about our city and deeply about our parks, and I think a lot of good happened on his watch. Anyone else? Go ahead.
To get back to Andrew's question about sooner rather than later, you've been saying sooner rather than later for a month, so how can we quantify what that means?
I don't know if it's been a month, but I'm sorry, I know you're doing your job, but my job is not to give you a day until I know a day, so sooner rather than later. Last call. Once, twice. Thanks, everyone.